Ladies and gentlemen, our next event of the evening is a one-fall match with a 60-minute time limit.
What I'd like to have right now,
where the big boys play.
This is where the big boys play, huh?
This is where the big boys play.
Thank you for listening to Where the Big Boys Play podcast. This is part 2 of our discussion on the Crockett Cup 1987.
I'm going to give up trying to work out what we did see and didn't see because the ordering is so out of whack here that I'm basically completely lost now.
Well, how many teams overall were in this thing? That's a problem in itself.
There were 24 teams.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
I'll just name some of the ones we didn't see. Wahoo McDaniel and Baron von Raschke, who were beaten by the Mod Squad. Basho and Spike. Who else? The Superpowers who were coming up. Mike Graham and Nelson Royal. Denny Brown and Chris Champion. I think we've mentioned all of the others.
Steve Kern and George South.
Oh yeah, Steve Kern and George South. So those are the ones that we haven't mentioned so far. And that's something that Meltzer goes on and on about as well, that it needs to be reduced from 24 to like 16 minimum.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Because again, I mean, based on the matches that made tape, they all generally followed a Southern formula, which is a formula that works, but it's not something I'd want to see repeated on, 7, 8 matches in a row.
Yeah, and the other thing is that it's clear that some of these guys are jobbers, right? So that has the, rather than making the roster look deep, it actually makes the roster look thin. Even though the roster is quite deep, there were 10, maybe 12 really good tag teams there, and then there are quite a lot of jobbers. I mean, I'd much prefer the if they were going to maintain 24 teams, I'd much prefer something like the Pat Memorial tournament, the Pat O'Connor Memorial Cup, is it? That we see in a few years' time, where they have like people coming from Japan and from all around the world, where we get a chance to see guys that we would never usually see, rather than just guys lower down the card. We only have one international team here, which was Giant Baba. We don't get any of him on this tape, and I would have quite liked to see him in this setting.
Yeah, the only thing that we saw was a very clip at the very beginning in that montage where he was facing Tully, which I thought would have been a very interesting kind of contrast of people that you don't expect ever faced off against each other and actually did.
And Meltzer is extremely critical of Baba in these matches. He just says that he looks awful in this sort of setting, and because he doesn't have that connection with the crowd that he does in Japan, it just looks awful. When you have guys like Lex Luger trying to sell for Giant Baba in 1987, it just looks ridiculous.
Yeah, I can see that.
So anyway, the next match that we have on the tape is, and this I thought was a really unusual. It feels like one of the most unusual matches I can think of. Big Baba versus Ole Anderson in a cage match. And there's a little bit of filling in to do here. Ole Anderson is now a face and has been kicked out of the Horsemen. And there was a storyline here involving his son. He was he wanted to spend some time with his son who was training to be a wrestler or something. and that was actually legit in real life, but they turned it into an angle. And he wasn't like kind of hanging out with the horsemen, going to their parties and things, and ended up being kind of called out on it, and eventually he was kicked out of the horsemen and replaced a few weeks later by Lex Luger. And this had actually happened quite recently between now and the Supertown show. So this is very early in Lex Luger's run as a horseman, and very early in Ole Anderson's run as a face. So we get a lot of Big Bubba is still being managed by who's he being managed by here? It was
Cornette.
It's called Jim Cornette, right? Jim Cornette.
Yeah, Cornette was out there.
Yeah. So we get a lot of clubbering here to start. Ole eats the cage and catches colour pretty early. Then before long he gets Bubba down, and this is pretty back and forth really. Bubba goes up to the top and misses, and then Ole Anderson gets a pile driver on Big Bubba, and we see a KO finish, 10 count. And I only found out, like, I actually in my notes was like, wow, when do you ever see a 10 count finish? But then I realized, looking at various different accounts of the show, that this is actually a last man standing match. I did think the ref was kind of really going on about the 10 count a bit more than usual, so maybe it's not a surprise that this was a KO finish. Any thoughts on this? I thought this was a really weird match to see.
Yeah, I didn't really think this was very good. Ole as a babyface is bizarre to me still. I know this was the second time we saw it, but it was still weird. And it was a lot of punch kick, which is fine, but I just didn't find much intensity in the action. And Bubba still looked really, really green.
Yeah.
With his when he was on offense and controlling, looked sort of sloppy and just really green. So I thought this was forgettable and not very good at all.
Yeah, and giving Ole Anderson the win from a booking point of view. I mean,
yeah, now that's a strange choice too at this point in time. This is, I would assume, the most substantial loss and definitely the most punishment we'd seen Bubba take.
Yeah.
Even in his other matches, he looked a lot stronger than here, where he looked, kind of just like another guy.
Yeah, and so. This is in my view bad booking, considering what WWF would do with Bossman in a few years. Building a monster heel. This is how not to do it. Putting, Ole Anderson's right at the tail end of his career here. He's a veteran by this point, so you don't need to be. He doesn't need to go over. He doesn't need a win. Everybody knows he's a tough guy. Whereas, if you put Bubba over here, you're really building him as being a legitimate threat against, whoever. So, yeah, I have some issues with the booking there. And I guess Ole Anderson was always close to the book, right? I know Dusty was booking at this point, but he was an office guy, Ole, right? He had influence in these matters, I believe. So now we get a kind of break from the Crockett Cup, which is really baffling to me, considering how short this tape is, and there's 7 hours of footage to get through. But instead, we get Tony Schiavone with Magnum TA for an exclusive feature. So Magnum TA talks us through some of his greatest matches, including his I Quit match with Tully Blanchard, his the match where he won the US title against Wahoo McDaniel, and a title defense against Kamala. And I just thought that this was going to be an interview, but then we actually get the full matches, all three of them, and I don't believe any of them were clipped either. We get the full match from start to finish. So this is what's on this tape. We get Tony and David Crockett on commentary for Wahoo versus Magnum TA, and I'm guessing this was sometime in 1985. This would have been when he won the US title. So Wahoo's on top to start. He lays some stiff chops, Magnum comes back, which is just a hope spot. He eats the... Oh, this is a cage match as well. He eats the cage, but then comes back again for a 2 count, works on Wahoo's arm. Now David Crockett here spots that Wahoo has the elbow taped up, so this is good psychology for Magnum to be focusing on the arm. He drop kicks Wahoo in his head. Wahoo comes back with a elbow. Wahoo eats the cage a few times. And then we get some nasty face rakes with the bottom of his boot. And this is a spot I've seen Magnum TA do a few times, where he kind of like rakes the face with the sole of his boot, and that always seems like a really heelish move to me. I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's a heel move. Hits a headbutt, which hits with so much force that he staggers himself. David worries that he's trying too hard to make Wahoo suffer, to punish him for his crimes, rather than going for the win. Wahoo gets back on top with a series of near falls. Magnum's bleeding by this point. He goes back and forth. Magnum hits a belly to back suplex from the second rope, but Wahoo kicks out amazingly. He comes back with some big chops, which get a 2. Then Magnum hits the belly to belly suplex for 3 count and the belt. Any thoughts on this match, Chad?
Yeah, I thought this, as I was saying with the other match, there was just a kind of lack of intensity. I thought this match conveyed it much better, and the intensity was there. Wahoo really is a guy, again, that I had totally neglected till I started watching this footage, and now he's really one of my favorites with intensity. And this seemed like Magnum's biggest moment before the I Quit match in his career.
Absolutely. And what do you think about the psychology that David Crockett is talking about with the arm and the taped elbow and all of this sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing we haven't really touched on so far. But Tony is solo for this show, except for this little montage, and he did okay as a solo announcer. I thought he kind of played it a lot like Vince McMahon in the early 80s, where he sort of has a lot of pauses. He doesn't try to be 2 announcers in one, where he tries to be the play-by-play and the color man.
Yeah.
So I thought that was fine, but David here, again, I love David's announcing in a cage match, and it sort of reminded me of the Final Conflict cage match, where he really gets over the psychology of what the action is, but also how dangerous and taxing the cage is. He really makes the cage a character in the match and does a great job doing that.
The other little thing I wanted to go back on was the raking of the... Do you know that move where he kind of rakes the face with the bottom of the foot that Magnum TA does? Like he
I mean, I can kind of see that. It's definitely a more heelish type move, but maybe in the context of the cage, and also Magnum TA is more of kind of a rough and tumble brawler type character, so I don't have a problem with that.
Okay, but this was definitely probably it's the only match we've seen in full here, but it's probably one of the better ones on this tape so far.
Yeah, I would say this was by far. Well, maybe. I mean, I did like that Midnight Express match, but we just didn't see hardly any of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't very long to begin with, but this was the best match so far.
So then we get another Magnum TA match, and it's a title defense against a US title defense against Kamala. And they're outdoors in a stadium. I actually missed where they were. Was it Virginia? I couldn't.
I didn't catch it either. It kind of looked like one of the Great American Bash tours. I don't know if it was during that Bash '85 tour or what, but
I noticed it was a rather sparsely populated stadium. It obviously wasn't a sellout.
Yeah, I still don't know why they ran. I don't know. I guess there was a pretty good crowd there for essentially. Obviously in '85 they were expanding, but having thousands of people at a wrestling show is still a good accomplishment. But when you put them in these huge stadiums, it just looks so pitiful.
So then we get an early crossbody to knock Kamala down from Magnum TA. Kamala wins back momentum with an eye poke. He guillotines Magnum on the top rope. We get some chops and kicks and the signature belly slapping from Kamala. Then he bites Magnum, who is somehow bleeding. Now he shades of the great kabuki here. We get a chest hold from Kamala, which is some sort of nerve pinch on Magnum TA's kind of pec, I guess. Then he blatantly chokes him. Back to the odd chest grip move. Kamala hits a big splash, which gets a 1 count. Then he hits it again, but Magnum is laying on his stomach. And rather than go for the pin there, he goes back to the chest grip. There's a hope spot, but that's cut short, I think. We get some more right hands from Kamala. Then he misses a splash in the turnbuckle. Where else happens? And then Magnum TA hits his belly to belly, but we get no count. And I don't really know what happened there. What happened?
Yeah, I guess maybe Tommy Young disqualified Skandar Akbar from interfering, but he does hit the belly to belly. So unless they really wanted to protect Kamala, I don't quite understand why they didn't do that. I've never really liked Kamala. He's a character I've never been, I guess, scared of or really liked, to be honest. So this was pretty bad with his, slapping his belly and the 3-minute, essentially a titty twister is what he gave Magnum TA. It was an awful nerve hold. It was kind of interesting seeing Skandar Akbar, though, in Crockett territory, just because I always associate him with either World Class or in the later days with Mid-South and the UWF. So that was kind of neat, but overall I don't really know why this match was selected.
Yeah, and I think the thing with Kamala is that he's probably one of the least well-protected big threats, like big men, especially at this point in his career. He's somebody who I see as really beatable, and it may well be because I major more in the late 80s and early 90s than early 80s, when I guess Kamala was a bigger threat, but he always seems like the most beatable of the fat men to me.
Yeah.
And then I actually, as great though it is, I actually skipped the I Quit match because I've seen it about 50 million times. So I don't know if you had any further thoughts on that. I think they showed it in full, didn't they?
Yeah. Just a great match that everybody should see.
So then we go back to Tony and Magnum TA, and he asks Magnum who he picks for the cup. And just to mention, obviously Magnum TA is he's not in the best of shape here. Obviously, he's lucky that he's alive, and he's pretty much paralyzed. Large parts of his body aren't working at all. So he's like, I don't know. I guess he carries it well. If you didn't know, maybe you couldn't tell. I don't know. What do you think, Chad?
Yeah, he had an arm sling, and he definitely looked a little, haggard compared to what we are used to. Yeah. But for somebody that, quite frankly was on the brink of death not too far before this, I thought he was having a good recovery.
Yeah. So he asked Magnum who he picks for the cup, and he picks the superpowers, Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff, of course. Shocking
prediction.
Tony says that we're going to go back now for Flair versus Windham, but as testament to the editing on this show, we get Jim Cornette instead, who calls all the women in the crowd fat.
Hey, would you idiots like to do me a favor, huh?
And ladies and gentlemen, of course, the manager, Jim Cornette!
He calls all the women in the crowd fat, which amused me quite a lot. This is the Road Warriors. This is the New Midnight Express. It goes straight into Road Warrior Animals' Power Slam on Lane. I always liked Animal's Power Slam. I think he does one of the better ones. Lane goes to outside. Cornette tries to whack. Lane goes to the outside and he's dazed. And Cornette uses his tennis racket like a fan to try to wake him up. And then he screams at him to remember that this is for $1 million. Which is all very amusing. Cornette's on pretty good form on this tape.
Yeah.
The Midnights get advantage and work over Hawk. Eaton uses a belt or a rope to choke him. Cornette gets in a cheap shot. Bubba is in there, so there's almost like quadruple. Big Bubba is also at ringside here, so there's also like quadruple teaming. Then we get a really classic Midnight Express kind of heat sequence where we get sneaky cheap shot. They're working over Hawk, and I think as Eaton goes and gives a sneaky little cheap shot on Animal, who's daydreaming on the rope, and then quickly tags out. There's a tennis racket to Hawk's gut. We get the patented kick from Lane on Hawk. There's some pretty nice kind of double teaming on Hawk here, who kind of sells as well as he can. But finally he gets the hot tag to Animal. I've just got a note here that there's a nice little bit of business with Cornette and Big Bubba, where Bubba is kind of looking to interfere, and Cornette says, be careful, otherwise we might get disqualified. And obviously, he's not above cheating, but he's got that $1 million on his mind, which was a nice little kind of bit of character development from Cornette. But we have a ref bump shortly after the hot tag and general chaos. Then we get a spot where Cornette jumps in and he blows fire in Animal's face. Paul Ellering is there as well, and Big Bubba both hit the ring, but the bell goes, the faces clear house, and the Midnights win. Presumably because Ellering used the racket for the DQ. It's kind of messy, but yeah. What do you think, Chad?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I kind of like this. Road Warriors were, they weren't featured too much on this tape. This was the only mention or what we saw of them. And glad you mentioned Hawk selling, because, you hear so much about how the Road Warriors refuse to sell, blah, blah, blah. But he really did do a good job, I thought, of selling the heat between the Midnight Express, and then the finish had a lot of kind of Memphis features sprinkled in as far as the fireball, and when Bubba and Animal gave Bubba the shoulder block off the ropes and Bubba went flying out of the ring, I thought that was a great spot by Bubba for a big man. He goes through the bottom rope and then sort of propels himself right into the guardrail. Even kind of takes out Cornette on the way down, and Cornette goes flying. So there was a lot going on, and I thought it was kind of an effective way to get rid of the Road Warriors without having them straight up lose. If you're going to do that, which at this tournament, was hand-delivered for Dusty and Nikita to win, so I understand why they wouldn't have want to go with the Road Warriors in the finals. This was a good way to eliminate them while still retaining heat and good action.
And I should mention here that the Baltimore crowd feels like it's about to riot. Like, they really are pissed off at the fact the Road Warriors
riot. They are not happy at the turn of events when the Midnight Express are the winners.
So yeah, I mean, this was again. I wish we got to see the full match, but what we do see here was pretty good. Towards the higher end of the matches on this tape.
Right.
Then we have Dusty Rhodes and Nikita versus Rick Rude and Manny Fernandez. And we go straight in here at a fast pace with Rhodes working over Manny Fernandez. Dusty gets posted on the outside by Rude. I noticed that Teddy Long, I think, is the referee here.
Yes, he is.
The heels double team Rhodes. Paul Jones is there. He gets a cheap shot in. Rude hits a knee from the top. Things slow down a bit then when Manny gets in a chin lock on Rhodes. Then there's a horrible, horrible clip. And we go straight into the finish from nowhere. Manny comes from the top rope, but Rhodes reverses the pin for a 3. Nikita is wearing a neck brace and is presumably injured. Now, I looked this up, and according to Meltzer, this was actually an angle. Dick Murdoch had brain-busted Nikita Koloff on the concrete floor on the outside and had been suspended. This happened a couple of weeks ago. Actually, Murdoch was going on a month's tour to Japan. So, to keep continuity there, that's why Nikita's wearing this neck brace. Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot is to be said for this match.
Yeah, this is pretty, basic, dusty action. You could tell they were sort of saving up because Dusty knew he had to wrestle 2 more times. I don't think anybody's going to confuse Dusty with a marathon runner, so he definitely needed to conserve some energy. So you got kind of a low-tech type match between these two, and not a lot happened. Very forgettable.
So our next match is Tully Blanchard, MVP champ, and Lex Luger. I think this is our first look at Luger, right? Have we seen Luger before?
Yes, first look.
Versus Bob and Brad Armstrong. Brad hits Tully with a drop kick from the top. The action ends up outside, and J.J. Dillon sneak attacks Brad. We get a nice belly-to-back suplex from Tully. Luger hits a powerful-looking elbow, and I've written, wow, an actual suplex from Luger here as well. Luger looks like He-Man at this point. He just is, he looks like he's got perfect body, basically, Lex Luger. I've always thought that he's probably got the best look of any given wrestler. Like he just, he could have easily played He-Man or any other kind of muscle-bound action hero. Brad gets an atomic drop on Tully and gets the hot tag to his dad, who beats on the heels until Dillon trips him up while he's running to the ropes, and then there's kind of general madness. Dillon and Tully managed to get a double clothesline on Bob for the 3 count, and this was pretty good, I thought, from what we.
Yeah, what we saw, this was fine. I thought Luger looked really good. That suplex he gave to Brad was very impactful. And Dillon, I know J.J. Dillon's another guy that we've really been championing in these podcasts, and I thought he was good here again, being active, getting his shots in, and then staying out of the way to where the referee doesn't have to look completely idiotic. He's very quick, and even the finish, he gets up on the apron, gives the double clothesline. It actually looked well, even though that's a little bit of a weak finish. I mean, a double clothesline when one person's a non-wrestler at this point in time is kind of a weak finish, but it was at least performed well, and Dillon got out of the way. So from the, of course, again, 3 minutes that we saw here, this was good action, but we just don't really know without seeing the whole match.
And I mean, we're obviously going to be seeing a lot more of Luger. I am someone who is not as down on Luger as a lot of other people. I actually like him quite a lot.
Yeah, I think I mean, I know when I was a kid, I had such a bad taste, and I mean, I guess this is one thing where I have to get over my framework as a kid, because growing up, in 93, 94, that was when I was 7 and 8 years old. That's a peak time of my fandom. And I was always a Bret Hart guy. So when him and Luger were kind of the top 2 guys vying for the top babyface role, in WWF in '94, I was always a Brett guy. Always was happy that Luger, sort of got de-pushed off of that. Kind of got back on track with him when he went to WCW, mainly in '97 when he was fighting the NWO and had that match I talked about earlier where he beat Hogan.
Yeah.
But then I guess, and we'll pretty much follow Luger all the way to the end with these pay-per-views.
Yeah.
And I know in '99 and 2000 he was just really, checked out.
Yeah.
Mentality-wise. But, up to that point, if he does have, this is April 1987. I know he was at least adequate in the Halloween Havoc 1991 match versus Ron Simmons.
Yeah.
So that's 4 years right there of pretty good action. Then if he has another couple of years when he comes back and fights with the NWO, that's not a bad career, really.
My feeling with Luger is that, I guess the argument is that he was never one of the boys. Never one of the, he was given tremendous opportunities. That somebody like a Brad Armstrong would probably kill to be in Luger's spot, right? Not only the spot on the card, but to be, in the same locker room as, to be traveling with Arn and Flair and those guys. And I guess the feeling was that he, from what I've heard in shoots and things, that he never kind of appreciated the opportunity he was given and never really took the advice that those guys gave him on board. He always, he had a kind of arrogance about him. That's what everybody always says. But, having listened to Luger shoots myself, he never really comes across much more to me as being a guy who's just not too bright, rather than being arrogant. I
think, too, if you're giving a pass to Shawn Michaels, anybody that's given a pass to Shawn Michaels now, based on, admittedly how big a dick he was in the '90s, I think you need to give the same benefit of the doubt to Luger for what he did in the past.
My feeling with him is that obviously, he is somebody who can botch a move, or he can badly execute things. And there's even a couple of times on the matches that we see him tonight where he's kind of looking around, and you can tell he doesn't really know what to do next. But when he does nail things, they always look really good. And that elbow, the suplex that he did, looked good. And the elbow, he's got a sweet little elbow that he does on this show. And I guess because of his general look, it looks like it looks pretty effective. I always liked his, even during his Lex Express phase or his Narcissist phase, I always liked his running elbow. It looked pretty good. So the next match now, we have Dusty and Nikita versus the Midnights. We join with Dusty swanning about. And this is presumably during the early Shine segment, so we're getting a bit more of these matches now. This seems early on. We hear Cornette. This happened in this match. This is the match where Cornette tells Bubba, to watch out, otherwise they might get DQ.
Yeah. That was when you mentioned that. I thought it was this match, and that was a great little, one of those things that kind of adds a lot of context to these matches, and there really separates Cornette. As much as I disagree with him personally on his opinions in wrestling now, and dislike the guy now in the wrestling business, it's a treat to watch him back then when he was in his prime and really added so much to the matches.
Nikita is in his neck brace still, and of course the Midnights target that and cut off the ring. The crowd is pretty hyped for this match. Lane hits a nice leg drop right across Nikita's throat. And there's a really amazing moment where Nikita is near kind of Cornette's corner, and Cornette shouts to him, "You're not a defector, you're defective," which is just great.
You ain't a defector, you're defective! Get off!
Eaton gets Nikita in a chin lock, and Cornette and Eaton argue with the ref about whether Nikita actually submitted or not.
Yeah, I did. I'd also like that where Eaton said, "Yeah, he's giving up. He's giving up." And I think it Teddy Long or somebody. I think it was Teddy and was the official here. And he was like, "No, he's not." That was a nice little moment, also.
Lane guillotines Nikita, and he drops him on his throat. Eaton uses the tag rope to choke him a bit more. And I've noticed that Nikita looks visibly smaller here than he did before. He's not the beast he was in 85, 86. He's definitely lost a bit of weight, or lost a bit of muscle even. Anyway, he gets the 3 out of nowhere after a sickle. Cornette goes absolutely crazy. He even pushes Gary Michael Capetta. So it's the superpowers that get through to the final. And am I right in thinking that Dusty, apart from that very early bit of prancing, doesn't really get into the ring after that?
Yeah, Dusty, again, this may have been, I don't know if they wanted to play up the story of Nikita's neck going into the finals, which was smart, but we see no Dusty here. The ending where Eaton runs into Lane looked really bad. I guess he was supposed to give him a knee lift, but he completely whiffs, so he kind of just runs into him, and Lane goes flying out of the ring. And then the sickle was done immediately after that. Cornette threw a good tantrum at the end of this, but I think in some ways we kind of see maybe even a little bit too much of the Midnight Express in this tape, because while this did have some nice moments sprinkled in it, this was the third time we'd seen some of their stuff with the interference and the racket. So I was kind of a little over some of the tactics. I watched this tape straight through. So when you do that, and this is the third time in an hour that you've seen the same spots and stuff, it got a little tiresome.
So now is the time that we get Ric Flair versus Barry Windham, which is really clipped to hell. We get, however, despite that, we do get a decent chunk of this match.
About 15 minutes.
Yeah, about 15 minutes of 25 or 26 minutes.
Do you know if this match ever aired in full on any of the Flair DVDs? Or I looked it up, but I couldn't find a definitive answer.
Well, you know, there is a full version of this that went out on like New Zealand TV or something. That Brian was telling me about, but it's like 7 hours long, which is why we're watching this. So it must exist in full form on that kind of 7-hour version of this show. And I'm pretty sure that this match, this is a famous match, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I know I'd seen this match before, but I would assume it was the clipped version also.
Oh, right, okay.
I have to get out my DVDs to check.
Well, anyway, as we go into it, we get the 10 punch in the turnbuckle spot. Then there's an obvious clip from that into the figure 4 from Flair, who uses the ropes for leverage. Tommy Young sees it and breaks the hold, and there's the shoving spot between Flair and Young. I'm still undecided as to what I think about that shoving match. You know? This one
I liked more than most, because in this one, Young shoves back, but Flair does not take a bump.
Off
the shove, which I appreciated, because that's mainly the main problem. I have no problem with them kind of getting into it, and it's a comical spot. And here, I mean, it gets the pop it usually gets, and the upside is that Flair's not taking a bump off, a 150-pound person referee. So I wish they'd have stuck with that as their kind of spot. I don't know when Flair started taking the bump off that spot, but I liked it a lot better here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure we've already seen him take a bump from that.
Yeah. I mean, I know they've gotten into it, so I wish they really would have stuck with that as the little iteration of their spot.
Yeah, I mean, the only person who should really be taking a bump from that, apart from Jimmy Hart, is probably Kurt Hennig. because, you know, you only need to tap Kurt Hennig with a feather and he'll go flying 20 yards. But apart from him, you know, nobody should be taking a bump from a ref. We get a lariat from Windham, who's still selling his leg, which is injured from the figure 4. And then we get a nasty bump to the outside from Windham, which was really pretty good. He goes all the way into the railings.
This show had some... I mean, I talked about the Bubba bump to the guardrail. This was a great bump by Windham to the guardrail, and then the main event, there's another one. So this had a really impactful spots to the floor.
While they're still outside, Flair goes for a piledriver, but Tommy Young warns him that if he hits that, it's a DQ, which is interesting. He hits a big reverse knife edge instead, and then we get a sunset flip into the ring from Barry Windham. Flair begs off down the aisle, some classic kind of stalling from him. Windham gets back on top, and he hits Flair with, I counted, 16 punches to the head. Pretty intense ones. We get a really nice spot where he hits a suplex into a pin from the outside. And I love that suplex of Windham's, where he hits the suplex and goes straight into a pin. It always looks really smooth, that particular move. However, he misses an elbow from the top, and both men go down. We get a figure 4 attempt from Windham, reversed into a pin for 2. There's a sleeper attempt from Flair, which is reversed into a turnbuckle spot, which gets the Flair flop. The action goes back to the outside. Flair counters a piledriver attempt with a backdrop. They never hit that piledriver to the outside. I think there's only one man in history ever to take that piledriver, which is I think DiBiase in '83. Can you ever think of any other times where they hit the piledriver outside?
I know this was after you stopped watching, but there's the one that comes to my mind is Steve Austin and Kurt Angle in 2001.
Oh wow! Yeah. See, I'd assumed that piledrivers were actually banned by that point.
Yeah, it was kind of this angle where I just remember Kurt. This was where Kurt was in his "I'll take any bump, do anything crazy" stage. So I do remember him taking some piledrivers on the concrete. But yeah, that's the only one that I can think of right offhand.
On the subject of those two in that time frame, I have to say that's some of the funniest wrestling TV I've ever seen. Austin and Angle, especially when he wears that little cowboy hat.
Yeah, I kind of want to watch that back in retrospect because I loved it at the time, but I was 15, so that was kind of right in my wheelhouse. But
I can imagine
one
that
day
maybe it hasn't aged as well as I remember it.
Yeah, that's what I'm sort of fearful of, but one day we'll get there.
But it really sticks out in my mind as some of the I really laughed during some of those when they were both sucking up to McMahon, and it was very funny. Anyway, where were we here? Then after hold on, so we get the backdrop after the piledriver attempt.
Right.
But then they quickly go back into the ring, but end up back outside again after Flair does his signature tumble over the top to the outside. Is that called the Flair flip?
That's I mean, it's the spot he takes in every match over the turnbuckle. Yep.
And then, speaking of 2001, he hits a low blow on Windham, and does it in the manner that I'd expect of the Attitude Era. I didn't realize people did that low blow before. I remember China did that move quite a lot. That kind of, it's a very specific type of low blow, isn't it?
Flair in his later career really utilized that a lot, but this was a nice kind of early version of it to gain the advantage on the outside.
Yeah, when he was with Triple H and Orton and stuff, I seen he did that move pretty much.
That was like his main offensive weapon at the time, I think, was to do that blatant low blow where he would hold the arm after he performed the move for about 5 seconds.
And then JR would call him the dirtiest player in the game or something. So anyway, it goes back and forth. Windham gets a sleeper, which gets a rope break. Goes for a splash, but gets knees in his stomach. Flair chop. Gets a Flair chop. Then goes to the top rope. Flair does, and obviously he's caught like he always is, and thrown. Windham puts the figure 4 on Flair. What happens then? Then we get a scoop power slam.
Yeah, the power slam by Windham. I wrote a note that looked really good for a very convincing near fall.
Yeah, that got 2. And then we get a really odd spot where Flair goes to the eyes, and then they kind of like goes for a crossbody, but ends up coming. I didn't really know what went on here, but he went for a crossbody and ended up coming.
Yeah, what it was he went for a crossbody, and he was supposed to propel, I'd assume, where Windham would go over the top rope with Flair, and they'd both kind of tumble to the outside, but Windham couldn't propel his body over, so he kind of catapults back in, and then they quickly go to the outside to finish up the spot they were looking for.
Windham hits a drop kick from the top. Everybody thinks that it's got a 3 count. Even the ref pauses, but Flair's leg is on the rope. And did they mess this up? Like that was a weird spot there. It seemed like
I think that was planned. When watching it, I had a big problem with the ending here.
We get a big vertical suplex straight into the pin when the Windham special moves for a 2. Flair comes back, however. We get a kind of bridging backslide sequence that gets 2 for Windham. Flair reverses a small package and gets a fistful of tights for the 3. So, despite the clipping, I still thought this match was pretty good, pretty fantastic. Meltzer gives it 5 stars. What does Chad give it?
This is why I would like to see I'm gonna have to look at my tapes to see if I saw the complete version before, because I know going in I was really anticipating this match. I love all 3 of their kind of big matches: the Battle of the Belts 2 match and the 45-minute worldwide draw match in January '87, and then this match. I remember really loving this series. Here I was honestly pretty disappointed. Kinda. I don't know. I just, it seemed a lot more back and forth. It didn't have the real cohesive story that I really like in the high-end Flair matches.
Yeah.
My favorite Flair matches kind of combine a great story with the action, more action than you're accustomed to at this time with Flair taking a punishment. I didn't see that here. Mm-hmm. And then which that's where a lot of the clipping might have lost a lot of the context. And then the finish I thought was really dumb, because I could understand after the drop kick, Windham's just makes a careless mistake and forgets to hook the leg. So that was great once, but then immediately after he hits Flair with the lariat and then pins him, and he doesn't hook the leg, and Flair gets his foot on the ropes again, which makes Windham look like a complete buffoon.
Yeah, Gorilla Monsoon would have been losing his shit there, wouldn't he?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of like how, okay, shame on, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, because that's just such a dumb decision. And even throughout the rest of the match, he refuses to hook the leg. So this match actually, I still say it's good, but I knew Meltzer gave it 5 stars. In the other reviews I've seen it's been at 4 3/4 or around 5 stars, and I did not see that here. I saw a good to great match, maybe even in the 4-star, 3 3/4 star range if I was going to give a star ratings, but I certainly didn't see an all-time classic.
I mean, for me it felt like, I probably haven't seen a Flair match for a month or 2, which is probably the longest I've gone in some time without watching Flair. But this seemed to have a lot of Flair by the numbers in it, kind of more than usual for me. I don't know why I felt that, but it felt like a lot of other Flair matches I'd seen. And I'm a big I'm somebody who's argued many times that because some people say, oh, all Flair matches are the same. And I think that's just not true. Like you just have to watch him against a range of different opponents to see that he can work all different types of matches. But this really felt like a Flair match, if you know what I mean. To me, it's still good. Everything Flair does is good. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. I wouldn't give it more than 4 stars probably from what we saw here. Obviously, there's good intensity, and you do get the feeling that there's a potential for Windham to be able to win. But yeah, I'm kind of with you. Are we going into the last match now?
Yeah, main event.
I think this is it. The final for $1 million. First of all, Magnum TA hobbles out to a huge intro from Capetta and a big ovation from the crowd.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, it gives me a tremendous thrill to present to you a man who tonight is returning to the public after several months. He is a man who has earned our respect for his personal integrity and courage, both as a human being and as one of the greatest attractions ever in the sport of professional wrestling. He has held the United States Heavyweight Championship, a member of America's team. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome here to the Jim Crockett Sr. Memorial Tag Team Tournament, Magnum TA!
There's a sad embrace with Dusty, which was actually pretty emotional without being any... I thought that was pretty, like, a genuine moment there between those two.
And his hug with Nikita, that was nice.
Yeah, with his old nemesis, Nikita. And I've just written here that I fucking love Gary Capetta. He's probably my favourite ring announcer, and I really like it when he gives it some. And he gave that intro to Magnum TA some. And he made the main event seem like a big deal. I don't know why I like Capetta so much. He's just got a unique way of announcing, I think, and like his very distinctive voice. Yeah, I mean maybe it's some of my nostalgia coming in as well. But I kind of have feelings for him that I don't have for The Fink, for example. I like Howard Finkel. But I don't think he's the be all and end all or anything. But I kind of love Capetta, so I'm happy that he's with us for a few years now. This is Tully Blanchard and Lex Luger, of course, versus Nikita Koloff and Dusty Rhodes, the Superpowers. With Tully and Nikita start, it goes over to the outside pretty quickly, and Dylan steals the neck brace. So already the heels have got a pretty nasty advantage here because that injured neck is exposed. We get that cool looking elbow from Luger again. Tully targets the neck, hits a neck breaker, then he bounces on his neck using the second rope in a kind of piledriver position, which I'd imagine if your neck was hurt would be pretty nasty. Luger stomps on the back of his neck, and then he does some pretty effective looking knees right into the kind of throat neck area. Tully goes for a chin lock. Finally, Nikita breaks it, but it's just a hope spot. Luger comes in with a big headlock. The action goes to the outside. Dylan sneak attacks him with, I think, his shoe.
Yes, it was a shoe.
Nikita catches Tully from the top rope and gets the hot tag finally. Dusty nails the heels with signature elbows. It's short-lived though, because the shoe gets involved again, but the faces end up winning anyway, because Tully goes for a piledriver on Nikita, but Dusty clotheslines him from the top rope for the 3, and the Superpowers get the $1 million. And then we get a spot where Mrs. Jim Crockett Sr. comes out to present the cup with her son, Jim Crockett Jr. And I've just noted here that she has a lot more charisma than her son. And then we get a very abrupt finish into the end credits.
Mrs. Crockett?
Thank you. It's been a marvelous experience to be here in Baltimore for the last 2 days. And it gives me a great deal of pleasure to Dusty Rhodes and Nikita, first to present them with this cup. And this check for $1 million. This is in memory of my late husband, Jim Crockett, the best ever. Thank you.
So, any thoughts on the main event?
I must say I loved this match. I really did. I thought it was incredibly well done. The spot with Nikita and Tully flying to the outside was the other spot I was talking about earlier that looked amazing. JJ immediately goes after the neck brace. You see some garbage being pelted from the crowd towards him as he's doing this.
I saw that.
They lose their mind, the crowd. The work on Nikita's neck was really well done. Really, really well done. Everything looked impactful. Everything was focused. And Nikita sold it amazingly. The way he sold the shoe shot, he really went all in on all these shots and spots. Only thing I would nitpick was I didn't like Dusty kind of riding in as the hero, getting the pin off the big splash. I'd have loved for Nikita to kind of give a sickle or something to totally, make everything come full circle. But I really, really liked this match a lot.
Yeah, and I have to say, those stomps and knees from Luger look like they legitimately would hurt, whether you had a bad neck or not. They were really I don't think I've seen him do moves like that later on in his career. Like he's obviously taking something on board from Tully, under his, obviously he's under their tutelage at the moment.
Right.
But obviously the portion of the match that is Tully working on Nikita's net, which is most of the match really, is really well done. One of the things that I think, people always talk about Dusty, booking himself very strongly, and he's just won about a month ago. He won the Bunkhouse Stampede again. Do you remember when we looked and he'd won every single Bunkhouse Stampede?
Yeah, he won every single Bunkhouse Stampede that ever took place, which is ridiculous.
Right, and those Bunkhouse Stampede matches, they sold out. They were 30,000 people. They weren't small events or anything. And then off the back of that, he's booked himself to win this tag tournament as well. So, I can see why Nikita would need this sort of push, and I think it's a pretty good booking to put him there. I don't see the argument for Dusty necessarily being in this spot, other than being the most popular babyface that they had, which is, I guess, the argument that would always be for any of them. I mean, I guess if this was WF, Hogan would be in this spot, right? So,
yeah.
But yeah, I enjoyed this match.
I was really shocked at how much I liked this match. I mean, I went in fully expecting kind of ho-hum affair. I mean, I don't know if I'd ever seen it before or not, but it blew me away, to be honest. Up to the finish, I thought it was some of the great performance by Luger. Everything made sense and was really well done.
Yeah, it's definitely the most one of the most psychologically coherent matches that we've seen in terms of telling a story from start to finish.
Right, that's really, to me, that's right in my wheelhouse of what I like in a wrestling match. So there's some of that going on too. But
just after this finishes, we get clips from loads of stuff that we didn't get to see. And there's did you see the sequence as well where they showed like clips of Baba and the Mulkeys and all sorts of different characters, and it just made me wonder yet again. We had 7 hours of footage here, and we only got to see 2 hours of it. Obviously, they could have. I can understand if the videotape could only physically be 2 hours long. Obviously, you can have 3-hour videos as well. All the WWF ones were. So, but if that's the case, why put in the 3 Magnum TA matches? That's the thing I didn't understand. You had all that footage, but you still cut it and put in 3 Magnum matches that.
Or, I mean, one thing that I would have liked to have seen maybe is just if they'd have cut the first night entirely or shown clips or something like that and then just shown the second night in full. That would have been nice.
Yeah, that would have made, absolutely, that would have made sense. Or maybe just show the cage match from I think the Ole Big Bubba match was the main event of that match. So maybe just show that and then the entirety of the second night. That's a much better idea. Or like, I guess if they were doing something like this later on, they would have had the earlier rounds just on TV, right? You wouldn't have had to have it all at the event.
Correct.
Kind of like they used to do with the King of the Ring, where you only got the quarterfinals onwards. Okay, well, I guess it's that time where we do the awards. So MVP for this show.
My MVP is Nikita. I thought he was, we saw 3 matches of his. The first one, he didn't do a whole lot. Second match, they started working on the neck, saw a little more. And third match, I mean, honestly, his selling, I really thought was top notch in that match. I mean, I thought the way he sold in that main event really made it believable. I was really surprised, blown away, and thought he really sold well. So he's my MVP.
Okay, no, that's a pretty good argument. I'm gonna go. I'm looking at the different candidates here, and I think I may have to go with Jim Cornette because I think he was at his funniest that he's been so far doing this. All of the tiny little things he did to enhance those matches. Like you said, we got to see him a number of times on this show, and I think that he did enough to kind of put those matches, like to make them more than they actually were, if that makes any sense.
Right.
And I think it's a rare thing for a manager to be able to elevate a particular match just by being involved in it. I think like he's such an integral part to who the Midnight Express were that he's almost kind of a member of them, if that makes any sense. And I think this is maybe the first time that we've seen like really good evidence of that over the course of a particular show. Although I do understand the argument for Nikita. So match of the night then. I can almost guess what yours is going to be.
Yeah, I went with the main event. Again, if we were putting star ratings on it, I would actually rate, I think, the main event higher than the Flair-Windham match. Flair-Windham match, again, I liked it, but I was disappointed with. Maybe this might be a good chance kind of 6 months down the road to reevaluate, because, again, I was expecting so much from Flair-Windham and so little from the main event that it may just be an expectation versus reality situation. But as of right now, I got the main event ahead of it.
I have to agree, to be honest. I thought the main event was very smart for all the reasons that you said. I obviously love Tully. I thought Luger looked great in that match. Nikita, as you said, was MVP performance really on the selling front. So yeah, it has to be that one. The finish doesn't bring it down enough for me to rank it any lower. And
the Flair-Windham match, again, they had the finish with it, which I had issues with too. So,
but you see, the thing with the Flair-Windham match is that if I'd never seen a Ric Flair match, say, maybe I'd be more blown away with it. But I've seen so many 5-star Ric Flair matches that it's kind of like I don't know. Maybe it's an unfair standard to hold a Flair match too. But it seems like I didn't see anything in that pushed it above the kind of general solid good Flair match. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, agree.
So finally we come to the Billy Graham Award.
That one for me, in his 2 minutes, I hated everything that Shaska Whatley did. In his match, he was only there for a short period of time, but he certainly made a lasting impression for the worst in this tape. From his terrible dancing to being out of position to his weak offense, it looked like it wouldn't hurt my 85-year-old grandmother. He's definitely my Billy Graham winner tonight.
Yeah, so it's keeping it within the Paul Jones stable for that award.
Yeah, the Paul Jones Army. We may actually. It's getting pretty bad.
My pick for worst is Jim Riley. Now, who is Jim Riley? He is the editor of this video. I sat through those credits to see who was responsible for this clusterfuck of a tape, and Jim Riley has got to be the worst editor of a video ever. I mean, it's not just the selection; it's the actual harshness of the cuts as well. I mean, just as a piece of editing, it's appallingly put together. It finishes without any warning. It starts abruptly. All of the changes are sudden. Do you know what I mean? It's like there's no flow to anything that happens on this entire tape, and there's no reason for any of the decisions that were taken either. And somebody has to take the blame for all of that, and I'm blaming Jim Riley. So,
not a bad choice. I mean, even with clipping, you can tell a story.
Yeah.
And as we discussed, there was no story told on these matches. It was just, let's just pick an arbitrary point to go to in the match, or let's just clip it to this point, and away we go. You had no background or reference point.
And I think this is the first hint of something that's going to become more of a narrative as we watch more and more Crockett and WCW. Obviously, Jim Riley is a Turner guy, okay? And he obviously had no care at all for this product. And I think it's something that we'll see more and more, that the guys at Turner just don't even know anything about wrestling. They don't care about it at all. And the kind of lack of care with which he put this video together reflects the lack of care for which that organization had for wrestling in general. But what's the next event that we're going to be looking at?
I guess the Great American Bash.
It's going to be the Bash.
I can't think of anything real substantial between this and the Great American Bash. So
was that a tour in '87?
Do what now?
Was that a tour in '87?
I think it still was a tour. I'm not 100% sure on that. I know in '88 it's just the one show. But I think in '87 it was still... Yeah, it is, because they have the 2 War Games on the tape. That's right. Yeah, it's still a tour.
Okay, now I think I have that sitting here ready to watch. Okay, well I look forward to it, Chad, and it good to be back.
Yeah, it was great.
Fans, for all of us here at WCW Center Stage, for Cowboy Bill Watts and the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, I'm Jim Ross saying good night, everybody.